You're listening to the Valley Labor Report with David Story and Jacob Morrison.
Well, my name's John Portella. I'm a 46-year member of this local union, IAM Local S6. I'm a sandblaster by trade, and I guess we can start there.
Do you hold any offices in the union, or are you just a member?
At the moment, I'm just a member of the, I shouldn't say just, I'm a member of the legislative committee, but I've held a number of positions over the years.
Okay. That's fantastic. 46 years in one local. That's amazing.
Yeah. In fact, in 1988, I helped with the merger between what was then the shipbuilders, IAMSWA, Industrial Union of Marine and Shipbuilding Workers of America, merged with the Machinist Union. Prior to 88, I was a proud member of the Shipbuilders Union, and now the Machinist Union.
That's great. That is fantastic. Well, thanks for your service, brother. I appreciate the work that you put in for the movement. So if you could tell us a little bit, maybe, we spoke to Levi some about what led up to the strike. But since you've been there, since you've been at a member of Local S6 for so long, do you think maybe you could tell us a little bit about the history of like further back than leading up to this strike? Like what has it been like seeing this local evolve over the course of 4 going on 5 decades now? Like what has changed for better and for worse in the lead up to this moment here in 2020?
Well, let me give you a 35,000 foot view here. Employees here at the shipyard have been represented by various bargaining agents since June of 1941. At that time, the Shipbuilders Union was formed in 1933 and created a union here, but was not successful in being able to get a government supervised election until 1938. They did not win that election. In the ensuing years, some folks here created an independent union, won a representation election in June of 1941, represented the employees here until 1950, and then it was the Boilermakers Union from 1950 until 1955, and at that point, in a representation election, the Shipbuilders Union was successful in winning that election, and we were Local 6 at that time. The reason why we're S6 now is because when we merged with the International, there were already locals with designated numbers that were in the Shipbuilders Union. So everything that was coming into the merger from the shipbuilders wound up getting an S. But there were several strikes prior to our merger. This is my 4th strike. I think a lot of things have improved, but in some respects, a lot of things have been the same in terms of our relationship with the company. This idea of gaining efficiencies isn't a new concept in the business world. And, we hear about it all the time. I think what we as working people want to see is that those efficiencies that are gained through technology or any other mechanisms are passed on to the workers. And unfortunately, in a lot of cases, they're not. And also, unfortunately, in a lot of cases, that efficiency disrupts the work of, the members. So, in the mid 80s, all the rage in the business community was this concept of a two-tier wage system. We went out on strike in 1985 for 99 days. We were not successful in beating back the company's attempt at that point for the two-tier wage system. And not unsurprisingly, as we've seen in many cases, the next round of negotiations in 1988, the company was eager to get rid of that because they found it was counterproductive. We were ramping up. We topped out at about 12,000 total employees in 1989, 1990, right in that period. They were hiring like crazy. It created hostility and division, and they could see that it was not a productive way to handle the workforce. So in the 88 contract, the company was begging to get rid of the two-tier wage system. And, we were happy to do that for them. And in 88, the company was talking about efficiency gains, this whole concept of a shipyard mechanic. I can do somebody else's job, they can do mine. Initially it was called the reduction of standby time. We agreed to some of it made sense. But, they're never satisfied. You give them a nickel and they want $1. And I think ultimately, what wound up happening is when you get into the late 90s, the membership, we signed a contract in 97. There was a 25-cent wage increase, but a guarantee of no layoffs during that 3-year contract. But, the members felt that they were not being adequately compensated for their contributions to the company, and that led to a 55-day strike in 2000. Since then, the company has, continually sought to weaken the union, attack the members, and not listen to the members, frankly, and trying to get back on track by, these efficiency gains. And it just hasn't worked. 5 years ago, we signed a contract early. The company approached the union. There was a very lucrative Coast Guard, offshore Coast Guard cutter contract available that was worth billions of dollars, and the company was bidding on it. They were able to convince the union at that time to open the contract early. It would have expired in May. We went into contract negotiations in the fall of 2015 and signed a concessionary contract, which only passed, by the way, by 100 or 200 votes. It was a very, very narrow margin. And I think people are just fed up, and one of the problems that the company has is that they are not relying on the skilled workforce that they have already in the shipyard to help them. They complain that they're 6 months behind schedule. Well, I can give you 30 minutes of firsthand stories of just the utter incompetence in mismanagement. And there are literally hundreds of people that we could put in front of this camera that could tell you similar stories. And so part of the problem is, for instance, when Fred Harris was here, he went around and had some dog and pony shows with, all hands meetings with different groups in the shipyard. And one of the things I heard him say is he asked 1,000 mechanics if they wanted to go into supervision. And he had one mechanic that raised his hand, and he had a laundry list of demands. The problem is, when I started in the shipyard, the model was you worked your way up. If you wanted to become a supervisor or a foreman or something, you worked in the trades. You had some base of knowledge about what it is that you were leading. Today, because those supervisors are as poorly treated as we are, no one wants to take that, and so as they try to expand the workforce, they've hired 1,800 people over the last couple of years. They want to hire 1,000 more. By their own admission, 75% of the frontline supervisors in the shipyard have 5 or less years of seniority on the job. So just imagine you're coming into the shipyard. You're 22 years old. You've never worked in the shipyard before. It's heavy industry. It's pretty impressive, but you come in as a welder, a tin knocker, a ship fitter, whatever. And you have a question. You would naturally ask your supervisor, I can't read these prints. They're not right. Or I can't backfill this weld. I don't know how to hook up this piping system. Well, if the supervisor has been here for 2 years and he's never worked in a shipyard, he's not going to help you either. So, and what we're seeing is a real drain of that knowledge and experience leaving the shipyard, and the company really doesn't have a plan to help themselves by gaining those skill sets. They bring in these new supervisors and they tell them, look, you're just managing people. Well, you know what? If your people are asking for some assistance and you can't give it to them, what kind of a leader is that? So I think the company has some real serious problems. And in this round of negotiations, their idea of gaining efficiencies is to go outside the shipyard, hire subcontractors, disregard seniority. So the people like myself with, 25, 30, 38 years, 40 years of seniority that have been here for a while, you know what? They can give me the shittiest job in my trade and take the guy with 2 years of seniority and give him a decent job, that really would demand the skill sets of a more senior worker. But that's what the company has done. And I think, in this particular strike, they have lost the heart and soul of this workforce, and they misread this resolve by the membership badly. I have had people tell me that supervisors that we know have mentioned to union members that the vice president of production told the supervisors when we went out, don't worry about it. The next week, there'll be 2,000 members crossing the picket line. We've had 12, and we were out for 9 weeks. They misread this. But that's because they've, as I said, they've lost the heart, the soul, and the respect of the workforce. And I've said to management, you know what? Morale is a tool in the toolbox. It's no different than a crescent wrench, a hammer, a welding lead. But for some reason, they seem to think that there's, a prestigious business school like Harvard or Wharton or something that's come up with some charts and graphs, which they like a lot, that shows, when you drive down morale, productivity will go up. Well, it just doesn't exist. The opposite is true. There have been studies, and they've sucked the life out of this plant. And that's part of the problem. I think they've got a long ways to go to regain the trust and the respect of the workers in this plant.
Right. Yeah. Right. I mean, that's like we were talking about with Levi. Workers know how to do their job, and oftentimes, like you were alluding to, management doesn't have a clue. Right. And it's just such common knowledge among workers.
Yeah.
You know, I like that there are just such easy things that oftentimes management could do to make the job easier, make the job more efficient, and they won't listen to that because we're just lowly workers. We don't have these fancy Harvard degrees. We just,
Yeah.
you know, we're just banging hammers, they think. So,
Yeah.
you know, it is really the fact that they thought that y'all would have 2,000 members crossing the picket line and you only had 12. And see, that's supposed to, like you said, that's supposed to be, they would think their job. You said that they would tell new supervisors, oh, you're just managing people. Like, okay, well, if you're supposed to be managing people, this is your expertise. You should know, you should theoretically, like, this is your specialty. You're supposed to be able to gauge people and predict what they're going to do under certain circumstances. And they thought that, I mean, 2,000 compared to 12. I mean, that's like, you know, 1,000% off.
Right.
I mean, it's amazing just how wrong they are, even at their stated expertise areas of specialty. It's,
Well,
I mean,
in the case of, you know, the vice president of production, I mean, this is his baby. He's responsible. You know, you've got planning, you've got materials, you've got engineering and all that stuff. But ultimately, it's production that builds the ships and sails them down the river. Mm-hmm. You know, his miscalculation indicates to me that he's lost touch with the workforce, if he ever had it, and I don't think he did. He doesn't understand human nature, and he certainly doesn't understand labor relations. But, you know, so he, you know, I happen to think that he's on a tight wire at the moment. I think maybe the president of the company too, you know. They'll be here for a while because we got to get started up again and get things moving. But I think corporate headquarters in Virginia are not happy with the situation, and they're going to say to them, you guys have to perform or, you know, you're short timers. So, you know, hey, they better get the big picture or they're gonna miss the boat. No pun intended, but when they're sailing, it's going to be away.
Mm-hmm. Right.
So I've got a more personal question, but and I guess it relates to what we're doing, but because of the expertise, the experience that you have, the years of service that you have in not just that industry, but in the union as well. And it kind of lends itself to this thought that unions are always trying to run businesses out of business or you know, they're always trying to destroy business. And the fact of the matter is, you know as well as I do, we ourselves are the business. We are the ones that make the work. We're not trying to put people out of jobs, but it seems to me, and you've got more experience than I do, but from the last, you know, since the 80s, the 90s, 2000s, we've seen these very good businesses like shipbuilding or like what I do with the rocket building here. The owners, the CEOs are constantly focused on finance managers instead of like what we've seen in the earlier days of like engineering managers that, you know, a manager that was an engineer had a good grasp on how to get product out the door and do it efficiently and do it properly. And now we've got, you know, in my generation for certain, all of these people that's coming into these businesses that are highly skilled, highly technical, and they have no technical expertise other than their finance major or their accounting and how to shift numbers around. We as members and we as workers are constantly doing everything we can to work within their system. And a lot of times it's a messed up system and we all know that, but we're still trying to get product out the door as best we can. What, in your opinion, can we do as union members to bring these companies to the realization that we can move the product out the door? But more importantly, what is there something that you see that we can start negotiating in contracts that will help these businesses? Because like you said, we have the expertise. They don't want to listen to us, but I think it comes from a position of distrust, because a lot of them are cycled in and out so regularly. You know, you may see somebody 5 years in a management position is an extremely long tenure, as opposed to 60 years in the shipbuilding business.
Yeah.
But so we're dealing with people that don't trust us, for one. But is there something that some ideas that you may have that would help bridge that gap?
Well, I think here what we've tried to do, and in some cases I think it's successful, but you know, in others it falls short, and that is to have joint committees, you know, between the union and the company around particular issues. You know, like a safety committee. It's a joint company union safety committee. In terms of the production, you know, that's a difficult one, because, you know, I mean, again, you know, at the 35,000 foot level, as you say, you know, we're not trying to destroy the company. I tell people all the time, I want Bath Iron Works to succeed. I've been here for 46 years. It's been a decent, it's been a decent career. The guy that's coming in behind me that's 22, 28 years old, if he wants to work here for 30 years, he ought to have that choice. Now, he may not want to, but the opportunity should be there for him. You know, I'm just not sure how you can negotiate something that says you're going to listen to us. You know, you can set up these joint committees and so forth, but as you said, if there's mistrust, you know, I think it has to start with these supervisors coming in, and the mid-level supervisors also, to understand that their greatest resource is the employees. That's where the knowledge and the skill sets are. That's, you know, the historic knowledge, the skill to be able to do the job. And, you know, I tell new supervisors, hey, listen, you know, talk to your employees. They're going to make you successful. You can make this difficult on yourself, but you know what? In the one sense, we're in a better position because at least we have some protection. You know, we belong to a union. Yeah. They don't. But I, you know, it's a philosophy, it's a culture, it's a model. I don't know that there's that sort of one thing that you can do that's going to change it. Other than to say, you know, look, I want to continue to build rockets. We want to put people, you know, back on the moon or in Mars, or you know, we want to have orbiters going around the planet and so forth. That's my bread and butter. That's what I do for a living. That's what I love. That's why I'm here. And I have the skill sets, the knowledge. I've been here for a while. That's, you know, help me. It's the old Jerry Maguire thing. Help me to help you. We're in this together, Mr. Manager. In terms of negotiating something in the contract, I think they have to come at it from a different mindset. They have to come at it, and some of that is their life experience, some of that is their school. You know, these business schools have to start teaching people that, you know, there is no capital without labor. There is no wealth without work. You know, you can play the stock market all day, but you know, every one of those companies is doing something. They're making something. They're delivering a product or a service. Well, pull the curtain back and it's people that are building that product, providing that service. You know, I scratch my head. Here's Amazon, for instance. During the early part of the pandemic, they said, well, you know, we're essential to to oiling the machinery of commerce in this country. So we want to keep delivering packages and so forth. We understand the risk that our employees are taking. We're going to voluntarily give them a $2 raise for 2 months. Well, at the end of the 2 months, they took the $2 away from them. Why? So what, Bezos can make another $10 billion? You know, there's something just inherently wrong with their thinking. And they think that it has to be a hostile relationship, and it doesn't. But they've got to come to that realization. They've got to understand that you and I, you know, with the three of us, with the decades of work that we put in here, want our companies to be successful. So my kids and their grandkids and my neighbors can have a decent life, you know, with work that has value and with benefits that takes care of our families. I think, you know, we have to be more proactive in the press. We almost hear nothing about organized labor. We have to be our own best advocates, and we have to change the mindset of the public out there too. You know, I'm sick and tired of listening to these people say, well, yeah, labor unions were relevant 50 or 60 years ago. No, there's a hunger for that today that they want to ignore. And, you know, we have to press that issue and make that case to the general public also.
Absolutely. And that's what, you know, that in more ways than even just the show, that is what David and I and several others here in North Alabama are, I mean, that's what we're devoting our life to right now is, yeah, and y'all as well is doing everything we can to educate people about the labor movement and about the fact that no, you know, labor unions weren't only relevant 50 years ago. They're relevant today and they're necessary today. And you know, Alabama has the highest union density rate in the Southeast, but so many of our unions are just willing to lay down and just let whatever happen to them. In North Alabama, our labor council had been defunct for nearly 20 years. And we have 22 local unions in the area. You know, what's up with that? Why are we just, there are, you know, tens of thousands of workers in North Alabama represented by unions. Why are we just laying down and letting politicians and bosses and corporations and oligarchs do whatever they want to us? You know, I think it's incredibly important to use the power that we have and to be in the media like we are on the radio now, and to have people that we can contact in the media to put our story out there, to release, you know, have press releases whenever something big is happening, and use opportunities like this strike to educate people.
Let's talk about the value add that we bring to our community. You know? And let's not forget Frederick Douglas, you know, 150 years ago said, power concedes nothing without a demand. It never did and it never will. And I'll tell you, it's as true today as it was 150 years ago. So, you know, somebody needs to be the catalyst down there to bring those 22 unions together and create a central labor council that then has a larger voice than just a single local, you know, that can press the issue, that can conduct forums, that can, you know, bring the story of organized labor and the value add to the general public.
Yes, well, you'll be really proud of your machinist brother David. He spent years working to bring the council together again, and we just reorganized in December. And a big part of that was David and other machinists here in North Alabama.
Well, thanks for that work.
Yes, David. I'm proud to call him my brother. We're not in the same union, but we're both in the labor movement together, and I'm proud to be able to fight with him by my side. Talk a little bit about the strike specifically. You know, we've kind of been doing the 35,000 foot view of the local and unions generally, but let's talk a little bit about the strike. What were some of I know that subcontracting and seniority were big issues. Can you talk a little bit about that and what specifically y'all won in the contract? Levi talked more about what led up to it, so I figured that you can kind of talk to what y'all won.
Yeah, I think so. In the last contract, there were no wage increases, for one thing, and wages were not the central issue in this contract, but we did come out of it with some wage increases, a signing bonus and 3% increases each of the 3 years of the contract. The big issues, as Levi told you, were seniority and subcontracting, and I think those resonated with people. I think the local did an excellent job, the strike committee, the leadership, in communicating on a regular basis in an honest way about what was going on, what the issues were, and why it was important. And I think, frankly, there were a lot of people that were pleasantly surprised that the younger workers, those people just coming in with 2 years or 3 years or 5 years of seniority, the 21-year-olds, the 26-year-olds, and so forth, would stand as solid as they would. I'm in a different financial position than somebody that's 21 that has a new family. They're just buying a house and so forth. So the pressure points are different for those different generations. And to see those younger members, rally around the flag, so to speak, and really push back against the company and say, this is our local. And and ultimately, again, I talked for a little bit about the company missing the boat, miscalculating the resolve of the local and so forth. I think the fact that we won the strike, if you will, we were able to successfully push the company back on those key issues: seniority, subcontracting. We rolled back some of their proposed increases in healthcare. I think the fact that we go back into the shipyard with that position just makes it even more difficult for the company, because of their miscalculation. They've emboldened the workers, and that's a good position for us to be in. It's not such a good position for the company to be in. But I think, that has to be a lesson to them, that they need to engage the workers and start having some discussions. When I call a supervisor over and say, take a look at this, or why are we doing this way, or how come we're redoing this product 3 times? That's, where's the rework cost in this product, David, you want to build a rocket, you want to build it right the first time, not build it 3 times over. We're going through that problem here. But within the strike itself, I think the resolve of the young people, because that's always an unknown, they haven't been exposed to a union environment or, the goals or the objectives of the labor movement in general, or even the history, because it's not taught anywhere. Okay. Yeah. So I think that was in terms of the environment within the strike itself. Again, I think the leadership did a good job. There was lots of support. The international president came up a couple of times. We had a rally. Communications was going out when there was anything of value to discuss. Even though the company tried to put a gag order on the union about discussing what was going on in negotiations, the leadership and the negotiating committee, I think, did an excellent job of getting that information out. And I think that helped to rally the membership. And there were, leading up to the initial contract ratification, there were spontaneous in-yard rallies that, maybe 200 people would show up at lunch in front of one of the buildings. And the last week, remember, Tim, we had the big march. There were probably about 1,000 people that marched through the shipyard at lunchtime, and wound up at the CEO's office. And those kinds of activities, I think, really solidified the resolve of the members and really, made, I think, the outcome rather successful in this particular case. So, it was good. It was good, to talk to people on the picket line and to see people showing up and doing picket duty and showing up when there was, an action call for a rally or something of that nature. I think people understood why we were out there. This wasn't to make $1 million a year. This was to really say the work that we do has value, and we want to be treated that way. We don't want you to just ignore seniority. That is a fundamental building block of the labor movement. It's a cornerstone of any good contract, and I think people got it. But I think the real driver was this whole issue of subcontracting. We're so far behind that we have to go out and hire subcontractors while they're trying to hire permanent employees at the same time. People got pissed off, frankly. People said, you're bringing in a subcontractor from California, to do my job because we're 6 months behind. I've showed up, I punched the clock every day, I've done my job, and now all of a sudden you're telling me that's not good enough. You've got to bring in, that just tells me, and I think everybody got it, that the place is horribly mismanaged. People are they're fed up, even the young guys.
Yeah, and you mentioned, that y'all aren't going out and striking for $1 million a year, and I think that's something that it's really amazing that media narrative or that narrative in the popular imagination has been allowed to persist about unions and about what they're asking for. It's a common thing, like, oh, they're going to strike themselves out of a job, they're asking too much, or and it's like I have never in my life heard from those people any complaints about, oh, well, I bet that CEO's making $1 million a year. He's gonna ask himself out of a job. He's asking for way too much. Or Jeff Bezos is making billions of dollars a year. I mean, the difference between $1 million and $1 billion is like you can't even contemplate it. And none of these people that say that y'all asking for a 3% raise every year and asking to be respected as you have more seniority and asking to be allowed to do your job instead of subcontractors doing your job. They're telling you that you're asking for too much, but they're never going to tell that to Bezos or to the Bath Iron Works CEO or to any of these other people. With them, oh, of course they deserve it. They're CEOs, and why shouldn't they get to scrape profits off of the fruits of other people's labor? I mean, it's really y'all aren't even asking for to have everything that y'all are making. Y'all are still saying, like, okay, you Mr. Boss Man, I'll let you have some of the fruits of my labor. I just want a little bit more. I want a little bit more. And they're gonna, and the narrative that they try to push is always they're asking for too much while I drive home in my Lamborghini. They're asking for too much for a 3% raise while I take a helicopter across the U.S. to go to the beach. I mean, it's really crazy.
It's, and we're portrayed as a bunch of greedy bastards if we ask for a dollar raise. And as you pointed out, I mean, Jeff Bezos is worth $140 billion. I just saw some article recently that, you know, he and a bunch of others made windfall profits during this pandemic. If anything, they haven't been hurt by it. They've been enriched by it. And yet, you know, the story that I tell you about, they voluntarily increase the wages by $2 and then take it away from people. So, you know, what's that say to those people working in those warehouses and driving? They have value. They're doing essential work. They're adding to the bottom line of the corporation. And yet $2 is a bridge too far for the corporation to reward their workers, you know, for putting up with this garbage. And we're a bunch of greedy bastards, you know. And
yeah, well, I mean, I looked up, just because I was curious, I looked up to see what the Bath Iron Works CEO compensation package was, and it's approximately $20 million.
yeah.
I mean,
yeah, at General Dynamics headquarters in Virginia, right?
Well, this was this may even be just the Bath Iron Works, the person
No, I don't think he's making that kind of money. He's probably
okay, so maybe
$500 or $600 grand.
okay, it is General Dynamics. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's General Dynamics now. Yeah, I mean 20 million. So that's the bigger company over Bath Iron Works. But I mean $20 million, and they were trying to run with the the narrative that y'all are asking for too much. I mean it's crazy the things that they're willing to just say publicly.
Yeah. But you know, they've sold this they've sold this myth for years to the public and to the media, that you know, look at these guys. You know, you could invent a computer in your garage and be the next Bill Gates. Well, you know what? 99.5%, and I may be off a little bit, of the American public is going to work for somebody else. You're not going to work for yourself. You're going to be earning wages, and those wages need to be sufficient to be able to support yourself and your family. That needs to have benefits, needs to have some security. But you know, and that's, you know, that's on the labor movement too, to tell that story. You know, and you know, we need to. I think personally, David, you know, we were talking about what can we do in a contract and so forth. But, you know, we have people on, there are whole cable channels that are nothing but business channels, you know, CNBC and on CNN and Fox and all of this stuff. And, you know, they've got this CEO or this analyst or this stockbroker or this financial advisor on there. When did they have a worker on? When did they have a union president on there? When did they talk about the economy on Main Street in Brunswick, Maine, or in northern Alabama, or in rural Virginia? You know, we never hear those people. And I think that's an area where we can start to, you know, make an educational and cultural shift, is to demand that we tell our story, you know, and to get a piece of the airwaves, the print, whatever it is, you know, TV, podcast, and get out there and say, you know what, we're living in a second Gilded Age. The wealth disparity in this country is not healthy for the American economy or its citizens. And, you know, that's what we're talking about. That's why unions are still relevant today, because our goal is not to destroy companies, it's to build companies. Our goal is to, you know, build the bridges and the highways, the rockets, the ships, the trucks, you know, to grow the food, you know, to be hospital workers in the middle of a pandemic. That's, you know, that's, and all work has value. And we need to say that, you know, and we need to say, you know what, when you're squeezing the nickel, you know, when Jeff Bezos makes an extra $10 billion this year, what's he going to spend it on? If the three of us sitting here today make an extra $2,000 this year because we got a dollar increase, We're going to go out and buy some more clothes, some groceries. We might get a new car, pay down some debt, reinvest it in the economy through our spending. And that's a good thing.
Yes.
But they don't get it,
Yeah. So we're, like what you said, it was mine and Jacob's goal when we started this, this show on the radio. I don't know if he's told you, but we're on a very, very conservative talk radio show where actually Sean Hannity got his start. This is the radio station that he built his career on.
That launched, and you guys are okay telling us that?
So what we're doing is going into, what we call the belly of the beast and talking to people that need to hear our story, your story and our story. But one of the misconceptions that we get a lot of times, and I'd like for you to touch on it for a minute, is, coming off of a strike, you hear all of these horror stories from the right about how the big union bosses forced these people out of work. They were hungry for weeks, and the big union bosses this and the big union bosses that. And what I'm constantly preaching to deaf ears is a union is the most democratic organization that you can be a member of. There are no, yes, we have some business reps and we have a president, but it is more democratic, I dare say, than what our country political system is right now. We hold more power over our union as a rank and filers than we do as citizens of the country. So could you speak a minute on how your process came about to go, even to going back to electing negotiating committee?
Yeah. So by the way, when you're talking about this podcast and being on the air and all of that, we're actually live on the air.
Not right now. This is pre-recorded. We'll be, Jacob's going to cut up the video and we're going to put it on the radio this upcoming weekend.
Okay. So yeah, again, David, getting back to this whole idea of the union bosses, again, those are catchphrases that were developed by big business to vilify us. You're absolutely right. Every union meeting that I go to starts with a pledge allegiance of the flag. I don't know that they do that at corporate headquarters for General Dynamics down in Virginia. By the way, every spending decision, unless it's routine spending, to pay the light bill and so forth, everything that we do has to have a membership vote. Now, it's up to the members to show up and participate, but we elect our shop stewards. We elect our local leaders, the president, the vice president, all of the officers of the local. 99% of the decisions that we make are self-determined decisions because members show up and say, we want to send delegates to a convention. And there may be a robust debate about that on the floor. Well, what's the value of the convention? Why do we need 10? Can't we send 5? We're in the business of representing workers in their interest, and it's probably among the most democratic organizations that exist in the country. So yeah, do we have officers at a higher level in Washington or Pittsburgh or someplace like that? Yeah, because we're large national organizations, because that's the nature of work. 100 years ago, there was an effort to the antitrust acts and so forth to break up these big monopolies, the Rockefeller and Carnegie. But you don't hear that too much anymore. People don't care that, Verizon or Amazon has cornered the market in their particular segment. But boy, oh boy, if the unions get too big and powerful, we're a bunch of goons. We're going to beat up little old ladies walking by a picket line. We're too big. We're too powerful. We got union bosses in Chicago or Washington that are dictating to us what we're supposed to do. No, we're a large labor organization because, the machinists represent a diverse workforce across the entire country, and there's strength in numbers. And so when we come together, we build more power that way. And that power is just a counterbalance to the power of the large corporations. If people think that the machinist is too big, the machinist union is too big, what do they think about Amazon? What do they think about Google or Ford Motor Company or Toyota? Those, no interest in breaking those up. So,
right. And specifically,
but that's because, let's face it, big, the media for starts is big business, whether it's the right, the left, the middle, or anywhere else. It's big business. They're making a profit. And it's controlled by corporate America. And so the message is consistent with what they want the public to hear. Now, I get it that there are political differences. MSNBC is a liberal outlet. Fox is a conservative outlet. I'm not talking about those political and philosophical differences. What I'm talking about is the business of communications in this country. And that's what it is. It's a business.
Right. And specifically, I think David was wanting to point out that no union boss is coming down from DC or wherever and telling y'all you have to strike. Y'all decided to strike at Bath Iron Works yourself, and y'all decided to accept the contract by yourself.
Right.
Nobody made you do anything. That was a vote that was held to go on strike and to go back to work.
Exactly. Based on the information that we have and, the goals and desires of the members. I mean, David, you're a machinist down there. You're building rockets. It's not my job or anybody else's job to come into that plant and say, hey, I think you ought to do this, that, or the other thing. That's a self-determined effort. You know your job, your product, and your corporation better than anyone else. So those workers that are working in that plant ultimately are going to be the ones that decide, we're going to work or we're going to strike, or this is what we'll accept, this is what we won't accept. I think it's the best system that's been devised, It is. And I think we need more of it.
Yes. Yep. You got anything else, Jacob?
I think I'll just wrap it up by asking him the same things that I asked Levi at the end. If there's anything else that you wanted to make sure was heard, and specifically, if you would have any advice for workers that aren't in a union that are thinking about trying to form a union at their workplace, and then any advice for workers that are in a union that are trying to think of ways to make their union stronger.
Well, let me start with the last one. The best way to make your union stronger is to participate, be an active member. Union membership is not just a privilege, it's a responsibility.
Yep.
Add some value to your local. Go to your local union meetings. Run as a shop steward. Participate in community service activities that are sponsored by your union. But people ask me all the time, so you're still in the union? These are members that I work with every day. I said, you're in the union too. What they really mean is, I've held offices over the years. I'm active. But but what I'm trying to do is say, well, why don't you come to the meeting with me? You know, so that's to answer that last question first. The best advice I can give to members is to participate and be active. The second question was, what about those people that are outside of the labor movement? Understand the value of belonging to a labor union and what it can do for your work, your wages, your benefits, your working conditions. Unfortunately, corporate America, with the help of the political class, has made it increasingly more difficult for members to organize and belong to unions. You know, we saw the height of the labor movement in this country in the 50s, 60s, and early 70s, and we've seen declining membership since then. But that's partially because of the legal roadblocks that have been placed out there. They've made it very, very difficult to organize. But for those workers, you know, there's value at the end of that road. There's light at the end of the tunnel. You're going to have to put up with a lot of shit, but you need to be strong. You need to organize. You need to be talking to people within the labor movement that can help you understand what the value add is when you come into the labor movement, but also understand realistically that that there are a lot of barriers and the deck is stacked against us. But that's not a reason not to fight. It's a reason to fight. You know, it's you know, we should be appalled at how difficult it is to join a labor union in this country when so many people want to join a labor union. And so the only way we're going to change that is to fight like hell for those organizing drives and so forth. That's I think an important message that people need to hear. Don't get discouraged. Stay at it. There are resources to help. Take advantage of those, because again, we need labor unions more now than we have ever needed them, not less, you know. And what was the first question? I'm kind of going backwards here.
No, that's not a problem at all. It just, if there was anything at all with reference to, you know, your union or the strike or the labor movement in general that we didn't touch on that you wanted to make sure you said.
I think we've covered a lot of ground today, you know. And I appreciate, you know, I think sometimes you're just letting me ramble on here, but I'm trying to stay on focus and you know, give you some of what I've seen and been through over the years and so forth. So I appreciate the opportunity to talk with you. I think we've covered a lot of it. You know, we could talk for days and days about the labor movement and the history that's not told. That's part of the challenge that we have. Ask people if they've ever heard of the Ludlow massacre or the, you know, the sit-in strikes and sit-down strikes in the auto plants in Detroit in 1937 and 38, you know, and the use of public and government assets like the National Guard and even the military in breaking up strikes, you know. It's falling. But you know what? Unfortunately, we don't write the history books, and we need to demand a place at the table when they're editing history books so we can tell that story.
Right.
You know?
Yeah. Yeah, no, John, I appreciate you talking to, you know, you said you felt like we let you ramble, but I really enjoyed it. You know, I genuinely enjoy the opportunity to, and I hope you don't mind me using this word to describe you, but I enjoy the opportunity to sit at the feet of the elders, so to speak, and hear their stories. Y'all have, you know, folks who have, brothers and sisters who've been in the movement longer than myself, you know, there's a lot to learn there. And so I appreciate you taking the time to share it with us.
Well, you know, yeah, and let me just finish with this, Jacob and David. We need younger workers. Those of us that have spent 46 years laboring are not going to be around forever. So we need people to tell our story, to understand the story. And, you know, I would say to both of you, thank you for doing something like this, because we talked a lot about, the story, the message, getting our side out, and these are creative ways of doing it. So I applaud you and thank you for doing what you do and giving voices in the labor movement a platform to discuss these issues. It's important, and maybe I'll be hearing from people in North Alabama. Who knows?
Let's hope so.
Maybe so.
Yeah.
Let's hope
Yeah.
so.
Okay. All right, John. Thanks for talking to us.
Yeah.
All right.
Still-
Thanks, brothers.
It was certainly our pleasure. I wish you were my neighbor, even though my wife would probably kill me because I'd be over on the fence post every day talking. But it's nice to hear anybody that uses Frederick Douglass's quotes in their talks is really, really impresses me. So
Yeah.
Well,
it was certainly our pleasure.
all right. Well, peace and solidarity.
Thanks for tuning in. We appreciate your time. If you want to see what we're up to throughout the week and get our snide quips about the news of the day, then you should follow us on social media. We're on Facebook at facebook.com/Valley Labor Report. We're on Twitter at Labor Reporters. I'm on Twitter at JacobM_AL. David is on Twitter at Radical Unionist. That's spelled RADICL Unionist. If you missed part of the show and want to go back and watch it later, search YouTube for The Valley Labor Report and subscribe to our channel. You can go back and watch the full show there, and we also clip segments throughout the week. And we also upload the program on more than 11 different podcasting apps. So you can see if we're on your listening platform of choice. You can go to thevalleylaborreport.transistor.fm/subscribe. And if you appreciate our work and want to help us stay on the air, then consider throwing us a couple dollars a month on patreon.com/The Valley Labor Report.